The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
The New World Order.
You can't handle the truth.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is April 30th, Wednesday. Just want to say a little apology for not getting an episode of Tuesdays with Perry up last night. He got in late, he was traveling, and I am sick. Nothing to be concerned about. I think it's a little food poisoning. Trump's first 100 days, and the hits keep coming. We've got more news today. I'm going to go through the headline countdown right now. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let's get to it. All right, we're going to start out with PJ Media. 100 days that shattered the media's credibility. What are they talking about here? Well, what if you watch the mainstream media, if you're watching the press, what we're getting a lot of is what Trump is doing is awful. He's ruining the country. All these terrible things. The tariffs. You even have Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, saying that we have to wait and see if the tariffs will be inflationary. Tariffs are not inflationary. That goes without a doubt, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. But let's get into the headlines today. If you saw Trump at his rally, there was a lot to report from that. He had a rally in Detroit, or outside Detroit, Michigan, or in Michigan. And, he loves his rallies, and the people love him. So it's worth, if you have time, worth looking at. Just the News is reporting Trump signals no slowdown on 100th day, lays out ambitious agenda for trade, tax cuts, and Mars. One day soon, American astronauts will plant the flag on the planet of Mars. It's going to happen very soon, he said. In the coming weeks and months, we will pass the largest tax cuts in American history, and that will include no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, and no tax on overtime. It's called One Big Beautiful Bill. Now, I hope that's the case. That was my urging, because they're taking way too long with this legislation. It's supposed to be one of the biggest budgetary bills in history, and not in terms of spending, just in terms of what it includes, and one of the largest tax cuts in American history as well. You're going to have to excuse me. Like I said, I got hit with a stomach bug yesterday, and it really, it actually happened last night, really threw me for a loop. So excuse me if I sound under the weather. All right, going back to this article here. After decades of politicians who destroyed Detroit to build up Beijing, you finally have a champion for workers in the White House. And instead of putting China first, I'm putting Michigan first. I'm putting America first. That says it all. That is a quote that's going to go down in history. Decades of politicians who destroyed Detroit to build up Beijing. Can't be clearer than that. There is no I'm not gonna get into it a little further. Let's keep moving. Fox News is reporting Trump voter tells MSNBC reporter that the president is killing it in his first 100 days. President Donald Trump celebrated the first 100 days of his second term at a Michigan rally with supporters on Tuesday evening. Story goes on to say this woman, I believe it was Emily Godspeed, everybody I know is excited. My biggest issue is the border, and he's killing it. Well, absolutely everybody that's here illegally should go. I'm not one of these that poor person. So they need to go. They came in illegally and they should leave. Of course. And I agree that it's not mean to kick out people or to put people in jail that committed crime. I don't care. See, crime, whether you cross the border illegally or you shoplift or aggravated assault, whatever it is, that's not conditioned on your surroundings, your history, your condition. If you're poor, you don't get to commit crime, or if you're coming from a poorer country, you don't get to come here legally. Crime is a moral issue. It's not a societal issue. It is you choose whether or not to violate the law. So I could understand they always use the argument, if you're starving, you should be able to steal food. Well, maybe, right? But we're not talking about stealing food here. If we were, we could deal with that on a case-by-case basis. And if the jurisprudence of a court or a jury could show compassion in that certain instance, but just because somebody is poor, they don't get to assault people, they don't get to trespass, they don't get a free pass. New York Post is reporting Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick announces trade deal with unidentified country. Done. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick announced Tuesday that he had broken a trade deal with an unidentified country. I have a deal done, but I need to wait for their prime minister and their parliament to give the approval, which I expect shortly. That's not really done, but the reason that Lutnick was saying this is because earlier in the day, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said there are no deals that are done. And so they needed to push out something to ease market worries. Story goes on to say, though Lutnick did not name the country, White House officials from President Trump on down have expressed optimism about India being the first nation to reach a one-on-one trade deal with Washington. India's come along great. I think we have a deal with India. They want to make a deal, the president said on the White House lawn moments before Lutnick issued the statement. And this again was on the heels of what Scott Bessent said. One American News, Trump gives first 100 days speech, revolution of common sense, indeed. And also earlier in that day, the Wall Street Journal is reporting Whitmer, Michigan Democratic governor, appears with Trump again. She has shown a greater willingness to try to work with the president than some other top Democratic names. So she appeared at a military base. I believe it was a National Guard base that was set to shutter, and that with President Trump's help, Whitmer and Trump were able to keep it open. And so they celebrated that with an appearance at the base where Whitmer was in the audience and Trump actually called her up to join him on stage, much to her chagrin. More about tariffs. The New York Post, furious Trump calls Jeff Bezos over political hostile Amazon plan to advertise tariffs surcharge on goods. Amazon said it had ruled out a plan to display a tariff surcharge on product listings after its founder, Jeff Bezos, got an angry call from President Trump and the White House, who called it a hostile and political act. The e-commerce giant said Tuesday that it weighed showing import charges on its discount shopping site Haul, but said the idea was never approved and it was not going to happen. Amazon said it had never considered displaying the charges on its flagship shopping site. That was misreported by the liberal media, of course, to create a sense of fear, which there shouldn't be any, which is really driving the market. But let's move on. Reuters. China creates a list of U.S.-made goods exempt from 125% tariffs. Is it all the goods? I don't know. Was it not immediately clear how many and which products have been included on the list? Which authorities have not shared publicly, the two sources said, declining to be named as the information was not made public. Companies instead are being privately contacted by authorities and notified of the existence of a list of product classifications that would be exempted from the tariffs, according to one of the sources who works at a drug company selling U.S.-made medicines in China. We still have many technologies we need from the U.S. Major ethane processors have already sought tariff waivers from Beijing because the U.S. is the only supplier. Well, that's good news. As I've said since the beginning, and President Trump has said, and many other pundits have said, China is in a worse shape than we are. American economy is very resilient compared to other state economies. And the consumer base, the market here, as I explained yesterday, is sought after greatly because consumer confidence, consumers willing to spend. It is a consumer economy here in the United States, and everybody wants in. As I stated yesterday, China is looking for other ways to make up the shortfall, but there's no country or no combination of countries that can make up for the amount of consumer spending. More about China. Reuters also, inside the U.S. battle with China over an island paradise deep in the Pacific. Once the site of a ferocious World War II battle, Palau is again at the epicenter of geostrategic tussle. America is building a radar station there, while individuals and groups tied to China wage an intense influence campaign with money and land. Just like they do with the United States and every other country. So this really isn't as much of a surprise. More news on the tariff front. Axios, exclusive Walmart expands support for American-made products. Walmart is expanding support for American-made products through new programs to help small businesses, the retail shared exclusively with Axios. Why it matters, growing the pipeline to have more items made in the U.S. can help insulate the world's largest retailer and consumers from the effects of tariffs and the trade war. Like I said, if the tariffs affect prices, is Walmart going to raise prices? No, because they're going to lose all their customers. So just like I spoke yesterday about Albertsons, the grocery store chain, increase in tariffs doesn't always raise prices because there's a whole supply-demand issue. And so if you raise prices, you might lose customers, maybe forever. And you certainly don't want to do that. So Albertsons rejected suppliers who were going to raise prices and says, we may not continue to work with you. So the retailer is forcing their suppliers to keep the prices low. And so Albertsons could keep the prices low and so on and so forth. All right, I just want to show you in this Axios article here, it doesn't mention China at all. And that's the problem, is that Axios, which is controlled by the CIA, as much as the new startups are Axios Politico, all funded pretty much with QIntelPro. The thing about Walmart is it gets all its cheap goods from China, and so it needs to restructure to keep its prices low. But they don't mention that in the article. That's the reality. You can get cheap goods everywhere. Why would you choose to have them manufactured in ideological adversary, with an ideological adversary, that being communist China, and an economic enemy. All right, so Zero Hedge is reporting what they consider bad news. Rate cut odds jump after ADP report weakest job growth since July 2024. But they say it's bad news because pay for job stairs rose 4.5%. That means that's wage increase, 4.5%. In April from a year earlier, a slight deceleration from March. Well, I think that's good news because, to be honest with you, when I was in the workforce, the rate of wage increase was never as high as it has been in the past year or so. There was some increase during the Trump administration, and that continued a little bit at the end of the Biden administration, but it still didn't keep up with inflation. Why? That's a problem. I don't agree with ADP because their job, first of all, their job counting is a little bit biased. We will see from the job reports this month about April or March. And more importantly, the inflation number. That is the key. Now it's 2.4 from last month. If it goes down closer to 2, we're in really good shape. Job report notwithstanding. All right, I want to get to this next article. It's a personal interest of mine. If you've ever heard of the tactical games. New York Times is reporting fitness fad with guns. The tactical games attracts thrill seekers and firearm enthusiasts with a combination of CrossFit style workouts and military role play. The tactical games is a multi-day competition that tests fitness and marksmanship, often simultaneously. That's the point. Competitors outfitted in military gear, it's not really military gear. It's just plate carriers. It's not really military gear. And what they do is they want to make sure it's like carrying weight. So they want to make sure that you're wearing at least a 15-pound. So you might as well have steel in there because they want a 15-pound plate carrier. So 15-pound plates, which is like steel because that's 8 pounds front and back. So that's like steel. I think mine are synthetic. So they're like 4 pounds. So I think it's like 4.5 pounds per plate. So it's like 9 pounds. But 15 pounds is like steel. I think the ceramics are up there as well. And so they're outfitted in military gear and wearing 15-pound weighted tactical vests, plate carriers. Spend 2 days sprinting, climbing, jumping, lifting barbells, and shooting, all while enduring the elements. Founded in 2018 by Tim Burke, a 23-year veteran of the U.S. Army and former Green Beret, the competition was originally designed as a relatively simple way to test accuracy under fatigue. When your heart rate is elevated from physical exertion, it can become harder to concentrate and more difficult to aim a gun. The reality around this is well, let me just get to the quote here. From Burke. Anybody can stand on the range and shoot accurately at rest. But if you get your heart rate and your respiration rates up, and now we ask you to do a fine motor skill, which is shooting, that's where your talent, that's where your skill gets built. So if you've ever been to the range, it's easy to shoot target from a rested position, like on a table, or if you have a bipod, or any sort of rest for your rifle, or even if you're shooting pistol, if you're at rest. And when you're at rest, if you're unexerted, fine motor skill is much easier to do. But if you're running around, jumping around, lifting and doing all these crazy things, and then you go to shoot your weapon, it's a lot more difficult to be on target. And I don't mean on target, I mean to hit bull or have a decent MOA. So that's where it's interesting. I suggest enthusiasts to go, but it's overwhelmed with fitness enthusiasts. So yeah, if you want to really compete and place, you're going to go up against guys that run every day, people that go to the gym every day, lift weights every day. So it's not for the faint of heart. All right, we're going to go on to the next article here, but I have to reorganize something. I thought this was part of tactical games. The tactical games are great spectator sport as well. The problem is that when you're shooting, they don't really have people around, but what they should do, and I don't know why they did, I mean, this is part of the system. As a televised sport, it would be really cool. I don't know why they don't do that. I'd be more interested in that than watching the NFL. But obviously there's safety concerns because you're shooting live rounds, and the course that people compete on, people are running around with loaded weapons, or they might not be loaded, but running around with weapons. And so there is some risk involved with that. So there are a lot more stories to get through. So let's move on with the Federalist. Reading scores plummet in rich blue states and rise in poor red ones. The reading and math scores of students in Mississippi and Louisiana have surpassed those in deeply democratic states such as California. Well, no surprise here, because this is the problem with compassion. Sometimes when you're overly concerned, you interfere. That's always been the problems with helicopter parents. If you're hovering over your child all the time, making sure they don't make mistakes, you're not only going to stress them out, but you might force them into making mistakes. And so what we have with California, some of the blue states, is spending lots of money and then not following up to see if the money is having the desired effect. So they spend money, let's say on school or class or initiatives or whatever, educational initiatives. But then they say, oh, they're still not reading up to level. That's because they're poor or they're this or they're that. And it gives them a pass instead of, investigating why necessarily that is. I think people want to be challenged. I don't think being overly compassionate towards people sometimes can be seen as patronizing. So it's got to be a fair balance. The NAEP, known as the National Report Card, assesses the reading and math skills of America's 4th and 8th graders. And that's a difficult time because they really should be reading proficiently at that point. By the time you're in middle school, you should be able to read. All right, here's a big story from Real Clear Markets. Tariffs and inflation, clarifying the convoluted. Now, I've been saying this for some time, so stay with me. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell stated on April 16, 2025, that President Trump's tariffs would likely lead to higher rates of inflation. It can't. Now, this is propaganda because Jerome Powell should know better, without a doubt. This somewhat gratuitous statement must be examined in the light of sound economic theory. Do tariffs actually cause inflation? Basic economics, stay with me now. To tax is to levy fees on income, sales, property, and other activities to raise revenues for expenditures. Second, borrowing enables governments to finance operations through future tax revenues. Lastly, expansionary monetary policy may increase the money supply relative to the outputs of goods and services, raising prices and reducing the currency's value. As Milton Friedman famously argued, this phenomenon is known as inflation. Expansionary monetary policy. That's what Biden and the Democrats did during his 4 years. To a rate almost unparalleled. Okay, tariffs do not cause inflation. Back to the story. While changes to interest rates and reserve requirements influence borrowing and liquidity, the most potent tool recently has been the Fed's large-scale asset purchase in the open market. These purchases are financed with previously non-existent money, described in Latin as ex nihilo, or out of nothing. That's a fractional reserve banking system, kids. When the Fed expands its balance sheet in this way without corresponding increase in the production of goods and services, the result is inflation. And if you know this, they were printing money and sending out checks, going out of style, right? Why? And it was during COVID. And what did they do simultaneously? Is shut down businesses, shut down production. So, of course, that's at that time, that's the worst time to start printing money, which is exactly what they did. And then it talks a little bit about expanding the money supply. U.S. money supply stood at 4.1 trillion, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you go into, money supply was 4.1 trillion, and then Biden raised it to almost 9 trillion. So consequently, U.S. inflation as measured by Consumer Price Index surged from 1.4% in January under Trump to 9.1. Thank you, Joe Biden. I mean, there's no need to discuss it any further. The fact is that that's expanding the money supply. That's inflation. Tariffs don't raise inflation. However, what Powell described is not technically inflation, at least according to economists like Milton Friedman. Inflation historically is primarily driven by an increase in the money supply, not by fiscal policy or trade regulations. While tariffs and taxes can lead to higher prices, which I've said they could, these increases are typically offset by a slowing economy or quickly reverse when such measures are lifted. Inflation never goes away. So inflation is a broad-based raising of prices due to the devaluation of currency by expansionary monetary policy. Period. So Jerome Powell knows better, but he tries to scare people. And the people he's talking to, like bankers and stuff, they know all this shit. But the novice investor sees this and is like, oh my God, tariffs are going to cause inflation. I had a bunch of people online saying the same thing. It's automatically going to rise prices. And I go, that's just not true. That's speculative. They could cause prices. They may not cause prices, price increases. All right. City Journal, Trump is likely to win his fight with universities. The administration may hold cards, many cards, and has seemed to play them all. Basically, what does this mean? All the talk you hear from the mainstream media about Trump is illegally doing this and illegally doing that, and he's got to be impeached and all this stuff. It's not true. He has the right to do all of it. Can it be challenged? I mean, legally through lower federal courts? No. At the Supreme Court? Yes. But the fight with universities, and particularly because, like I said, congressionally appropriated funds must be spent. And that's why it's so important with the next budget bill is to get rid of all this shit. All this subsidizing Ivy League universities who have endowments in the tens of billions shouldn't be giving billions. And why do they have endowments of billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars? Is because the federal taxpayer gives them 6 or 7 billion every year. On the other side of the aisle, PJ Media is reporting things keep getting worse for Democrats. Democrats just hit a staggering new low, and even CNN can't spin it. On CNN News Central, Brianna Killar revealed that Democrat leadership approval has plummeted to a record-breaking 27%, the lowest number CNN has recorded since it started polling this question nearly 20 years ago. New polling shows Democrat leadership with only 27% approval. It's a record low for the party in CNN polling back to 2008. Why is this? Because the electorate is smarter than you give it credit for. Even people that aren't well educated, particularly lately, people that consider themselves patriots have been brushing up on their civics. The Federalist is reporting historical illiterates like Joy Reid think more diversity would have saved the Roman Empire. I don't know if you saw this on Joy Reid. I don't know. Either she has a podcast or something now, or she was out there in cyberspace, spewing the same old crap that she used to do on her show. And it's more of the same. She graduated from Harvard, so you know that she knows a thing or two about ancient Civ. However, she's either brainwashed or she's doing the brainwashing about the 1619 Project and other shit like that. We'll just go to the story. Joy Reid's DEI rant about the Roman Empire is what happens when you take the 1619 Project seriously. What did she go on to say? The Roman Empire didn't survive because it didn't have enough strength in its diversity. It suppressed its diversity and it died. Let me tell you a thing about the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was one of the most diverse cultures in anciency, without a doubt. So I don't know how you get across on this. The Romans invited, because once a land was conquered by Rome, you became a Roman citizen, by a de facto Roman citizen. And so all the people from the empire, not all of them, but some of them would travel to Rome. And actually the Roman Empire was very diverse. And that the Roman Empire, once you became a Roman citizen, you had certain rights and you were able to engage in political discourse and all these different things. It was very diverse. So the fact is, it's actually opposite of what she said. And although it wasn't democratic in that sense, because it was a republic, and you should know the difference, democracy was actually born in ancient Greece, which came before the Roman Empire. But the Romans learned a thing or two about democracy, and that's why they went with Plato's version of government, which is republicanism. And by the way, republicanism is when the populace, the electorate, dictates the government. So it's rule by the people. Democracy is a process where you can, democracy is a process which can be instituted in a republic. So that's why technically the United States is a democratic republic. Moving on, just news, California bill would have the effect of legalizing welfare fraud by raising felony threshold to $25,000. California legislators are seeking to raise the felony threshold for welfare fraud from $950 to $25,000, which one lawmaker says would effectively legalize welfare fraud. How did that affect shoplifting? They did relatively the same thing, raising the limit for petty shoplifting from $25 to $900. And so what would people do? They would steal just under $900. Senate Bill 560, sponsored by State Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas, a Democrat of Los Angeles, would raise the existing $950 threshold to $25,000. Why? Well, it's not her money. It's federal tax dollars. For felony charges for welfare obtained and retained fraudulently, the bill would also prohibit a person from being additionally charged with perjury based solely on statement made to a county welfare department. So basically, if you lie, you can't be held for perjury. If you lie to the welfare department to obtain more money, so you try to obtain money from the government fraudulently by lying, that you won't be held. I mean, it's such bullshit. Fraudsters, welfare fraudsters should be kicked out of the program. So you took more than you deserved, now you get none. I know I'm very vindictive. I'm actually not. I don't like when people break the law. They say they're Democrats. You arrive at legislation through a democratic process, and then you just disregard it. How are you a Democrat then? You're not. Okay? If you don't like a law, try to repeal it. Florida Attorney General Altmaier starts first Office of Parental Rights. The OPR litigators will provide justice to parents and families who have rights who have been violated by the public school system. Government should understand that when it comes to raising a child, they don't know best. And this is basically, there's already a law in Florida that enshrines parental rights, but schools are still violating it. So they need an enforcement system. The Hill is reporting House GOP blocks Democrats from forcing votes on Signal scandal Musk conflicts of interest. House Republicans moved on Tuesday to block Democrats from forcing votes on the Trump administration's use of Signal, potential conflicts of interest involving Elon Musk, and other controversial topics. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's some sort of scandalous thing that the Speaker of the House and a majority blocks the Democrats' insistence on mucking up the works with silly shit. Elon Musk was an employee of the federal government. He did an audit of departments, perfectly legal. And Signal, which was been recommended by the intelligence agencies as a secure way of communicating, that's done. How Jeffrey Goldberg got on the Signal chat in the first place, that's the issue, not the fact of using Signal. But they always want to make some sort of scandal where it isn't. Where there is a scandal, though, GOP senators reintroduced Pelosi Act, which would ban Congress from trading stock. GOP Senator Josh Hawley recently introduced a bill proposing a ban on members of Congress from engaging in trading and owning stocks, naming it the Pelosi Act, because she used her position to make hundreds of millions of dollars. She didn't do the trading, her husband did. But she got all the information. Hawley, a representative of Missouri, a Republican senator from Missouri, whose acronym stands for Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments Act, previously failed to pass the law under Biden. Members of Congress should be fighting for the people they were elected to serve, not day trading at the expense of their constituents. New York Post is reporting. I just have to go back to this article for a second. Ban members of Congress from engaging in trading and owning stocks. My first problem with this is owning stocks. I think Congress should be allowed to own stocks, but the trading of stocks, particularly day trading and moving investments around, shouldn't be allowed. So I think they could own stocks, but if they do any trading while they're serving, it should be investigated to look for a conflict of interest or insider trading, and those sort of laws should apply to Congress. So you can own stock, and your stocks can do well while you're in office, but you can't trade because that'll keep you from acting on information you may receive. New York Post Milwaukee judge Hannah Dugan, who allegedly helped illegal migrant evade ICE, is temporarily relieved of duties days after FBI arrest. Oh, she should be fired. She's hiring a top law firm to represent her. I don't know. She doesn't really have a leg to stand on. She is an officer of the court. They should be held to higher standard in terms of violations of the law. Like I said, I don't like people who break the law. And I'm not talking about speeding or if you're in a state that doesn't allow pot smoking if you smoke pot, because that doesn't bother anybody. You know, if you're violating a law that directly affects people, let's say, and this is a pet peeve of mine, walking dogs off leash. All right, well, if the dog walks right by your side and doesn't go in anybody's yards and doesn't approach people and jump on them or attack other dogs or stuff, yeah, okay. But the problem is the people that walk their dogs off leash, they let the dogs run in other people's property and piss on your lawn and on your bushes and stuff and run up to you. That shouldn't be allowed. I mean, that's the problem. It starts affecting other people. You're breaking the law. Now, in the case of Dugan, we elected a president, United States, to conduct deportation efforts. So you're doing something illegal that is undermining the vote of 50, 60 million Americans on a whim. All right, moving on. New York Post, Elon Musk no longer working from the White House, talking to him on the phone, says Susie Wiles. Is preparing to transition out of his office role with the Department of Government Efficiency, which is based a short walk from the Oval Office. He's instituted his people there. There's going to be ongoing audits. It's going to become a permanent thing. It's already, the Department of Government Efficiency was just renamed and it took over another agency which already existed. And that those efforts are going to continue, obviously, until a Democrat takes office and probably disbands it. If you didn't hear, Jack Posobiec confronts Representative Jamie Raskin, a Maryland Democrat in Washington, D.C., and is assaulted by Democrat union workers. And he was yelling at Raskin, Jamie, why did you lose the popular vote? Why did you lose every single swing state? Posobiec was referring to the 2024 election. The crowd, led by the congressman, began to chant USA before an unruly mob assaulted Posobiec and cursed at him, knocking his cell phone to the ground. That's assault. That's breaking the law. If you're in public, you can't keep other public people from being around you. Right? So if you have a public rally and you just go and stand there and start interviewing people, whatever, or shouting, you have a counter protest, whatever you do, that's your right. That shouldn't invite verbal attacks and or particularly assault, which assault is just touching someone, spitting on them or whatever. So let's go around the world a little bit. Canada election 2025 results as it happened. Carney's Liberals to form minority government. Well, what does that mean? Minority government, which means the Liberals did not have a resounding victory. They elected Mark Carney, which I suspect was fraudulent. But who knows? But the point is, the Liberals didn't get a resounding victory because they have to, in a parliamentary system, you have to cobble together support from other parties to govern. It's a bad system, really. People are like, I don't like the two-party system. You want a parliamentary system? Go for it. The New York Times reports, can MAGA-style rallies work in Britain? Nigel Farage, we'll find out. Nigel Farage, a right-wing populist ally of President Trump, has been touring England ahead of local elections, hoping to convert polling surge for his party into power. It will. Like I said, Canada really should have went to the Conservatives. It's happening all over the globe. People realize a liberal world order, globalism, only sucked out the wealth out of their countries and undermined their nation's sovereignty. Mr. Farage, who leads an anti-immigration party, Reform UK, well, that's one of their top platforms, has been a supporter of President Trump. In the weeks before municipal elections, a special election in England on May 1st, Farage has been touring the country, taken to the stage in Cornwall, Darlington, and Hull, smiling broadly, cracking jokes, and rallying against illegal immigrants who he promises to deport. Since returning to the leadership of the Reform Party last year and being elected as a British lawmaker for the first time, he was elected into government, but it was the EU government. He was a representative in the EU Parliament. His insurgent party, he brought his insurgent party extraordinary surge in the polls, and it won 14%. Now regularly polls at 25%, overtaking the main opposition Conservatives. How does that sound familiar? Same thing happened in Britain. Same thing happened in Romania. Same thing happened in the United States. Is because the neoconservatives that play along with the liberals, nobody wants that. And immigrants who fail to assimilate, or even if they do assimilate, are problematic, particularly at the levels that they're allowed into the country. Fox News, I already have a Real ID, but I have second thoughts. Can I go back? It's been 20 years since Congress passed the Real ID Act, mandating states to implement certain minimum security standards for issuing ID. I don't know if you can go back. You can get rid of it. Use a passport. That's what I do. More disturbing tech news, Wall Street Journal. I recorded everything I said for 3 months. AI has replaced my memory. The Be Limitless and Plod wearables record everything you say and use AI to provide summaries, to-dos, and slightly terrifying glimpse of the future. In other words, the shit you can't remember, it remembers. It records everything. How is that going to be good for you? Privacy. Oh, it's a secure cloud. Yeah. I had some guy trying to sell me security the other day. It's all on a secure server. More tech news. New York bans smartphones in schools, joining national movement. Governor Kathy Hochul argued that the bell-to-bell ban, which restricts the devices during class, lunch, and other parts of the school, would help prevent disruption and cyberbullying. Yeah, kids shouldn't be on their cell phones. Kids should have flip phones. The problem is, if you give a kid a smartphone, he's on it all the time. Because it's addictive. It's meant to be addictive. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget To engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Perry and I might try to get Tuesdays with Perry episode up tonight. We go live at 9:15. I'm going to try. I'm feeling okay now, and we'll see what happens. So, watch for that tonight around 9:15. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. And join me every day, Monday through Friday, live stream 10 a.m. on Rumble. Check out my other website, libpop.org. And check me out on social media. X, Facebook, Getter, Mind, Truth Social, Substack. And Substack is limited by podcast to an hour. And so I've made a concerted effort to keep them under the hour. We're at 50 minutes, 52 minutes. Thanks for joining me today. Check out the links in the description. I have a link for Liberty at Liberty Merchandise. It's actually the Alex Jones store, but if you buy through my link, I get a couple bucks. All right, thanks for joining me today. Hope to see you tonight. If not, I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
Google me, bitch!